Hello and welcome to our Future Transactions podcast brought to you by Forces Children Scotland thanks to funding from the Scottish Veterans Fund. Future Transactions supports families to prepare financially for when the time comes to move into civilian life. From providing useful information and advice to listening to the lived experience of veteran families, we hope you find our podcast useful today. Today we're talking to Ed from the NHS, who's the Principal Lead on the Armed Forces Talent Programme. So hi Ed, thanks for being here today.
Not at all.
So could you just give us a bit of background about who you are and how you end up in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I served myself in the Royal Regiment of Scotland from 2010 to 2016 in the regulars. I've then cross-decked across to the reserves when I left and had a plethora of different jobs, but it had been a while since I'd applied for any because it was working in my own business or doing startups, and it was more sort of, conversations that had led to that. And it was only when I'd seen someone suggest about joining the Armed Forces Talent Programme as part of the team, I sort of had a look into the NHS and saw the application process that was there. And I'd looked at a couple of other roles and I'd seen that people were veering away from a CV and cover letter, which is often something that's taught quite regularly, and people then sort of gain their skills and that, have a fantastic CV, and then you get a different application form, which was the same for me. But because I again utilised, which I'd recommend anyone to do, their contacts within an organisation, I got people to check over what it was that I was putting in this application form. So for us in the NHS, there's, for the vast majority of roles, 3 questions that get asked, which are: why are you a good fit for the role, why the NHS, and any other information. And as I say, I ran it past a couple of people. They gave me the thumbs up, and it passed muster to get me through to interview, and then I was able to talk more about my experiences and give a little bit more in depth about why I wanted to be part of the role, and they saw fit to employ me in it, and then, as they say, the rest is history for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a good point. Like you said, I think when young people go through school, it is that CV and cover letter kind of thing you're taught, and you're taught how to build a CV, how to build a cover letter, but a lot of places are moving away from that, not just the NHS. A lot of private companies and even civil service roles are moving away from that, so it can be quite intimidating. I think when you're like, oh, this isn't what I learned. And sometimes it's intimidating to almost transfer that over onto an application, and I think that can be quite confusing for people. So what would be your biggest tips for the application process?
Well, specifically for the NHS, because everyone of the applications is read by a human.
That's good.
So it's sort of thinking about, okay, well what do I need to do then? We as humans are, inherently wanting to take a path of least resistance, I suppose. So what I tell people is there's an essential and desirable criteria list that people need to make sure that they look at that before, putting in their application, rather just assuming what the role will entail. And we run a number of sessions to help people understand this, and we've got a specific application session that we can send a link to if people are interested, and they can have a look at that. But what we'll get, as I say, is these essential and desirable criteria. Now, having interviewed people and taken people to interview, I've done it myself, where I list all the essential and desirable criteria, and if someone evidences they've got it, I'm able to say, right, okay, I can justify why I'm taking someone through to interview. But it needs to be almost, spelt out in very basic language, if possible, not in sort of military jargon that is understood within the military, but to anyone. So I often sort of say, if I was explaining it to a 4 or 5 year old child, this is, this is what I did and these were my experiences. It ensures you're going to get the point across. So key thing is finding out what they are and being able to evidence it is the key to that. What I have seen is that people write fantastic applications, they're just not answering those questions. Something else I would say is we're not going to get the first job we apply for, every single time we apply for a role. It's almost just, down to the numbers game. So if you've got skills and strengths that you're going to constantly be putting into applications, having a Word document or a spreadsheet where you have these, so you're not having to think about just typing it out every time. You can do a bit of copy and paste and ensure that you're then tailoring it to the application. Specifically for the military community as well, I find on the whole people are very humble, and we talk about things in team achievements and what we have done, and as a team, which I was involved with, we did this. And then someone who is hiring isn't looking to hire the team, they're looking to hire the individual, so they want to know what your role with the team was, what the skills that you bring to the table, because you're the individual that's going to be brought in. Another one that sort of gets asked as a question a lot is, can I use AI? And I know we sort of spoke before about, different learnings and ways of approaching things. With my dyslexia, staring at a blank page can be quite intimidating for me. So I often use AI to give me a bit of structure. The key thing is, especially for me, because I've used it, I know what it looks like. So when I see someone who has just gone, right, fill in this job application for me, it's very easy to tell. So everything needs to be personalised, not only to the sort of what it is that you as an individual has done, but again, not having it as AI, but if giving some structure and sticking within a word count is something that people maybe have a little more difficulty with. I would certainly recommend using that. Then you've got the old classics. Read all the questions carefully. Don't do what I did. When you're asked for references, make sure it goes back 3 years, so that you're not having then, to spend extra time doing things there. So again, what we do is go through in a lot more detail and give people the ability to bring any vacancies they might be considering, to the sessions and talk through them and say, okay, this is probably what's being looked for. We mentioned on the other podcast the fact that the NHS is broken down into 22 different boards, and very much like any organisation, you might have 22 different teams that all wear the same uniform, all have the same values, but there will be just slight nuances in the way that each team does something, and that's the same across the board. So we try and again give advice about where you can find the information about the essential and desirable criteria, what might sort of land best within teams within certain areas as well. And this is sort of information and experience you just gain by being in an organisation. It's difficult to find elsewhere. So the key one, in fact, that would overarch sort of all of that is as I did, utilise the contacts or us as a programme to be able to get some of that ground truth for what's required. Putting in hard work and effort into an application, whilst that's great, if it's not the right stuff that's going in, it's hard work that's wasted. Put the hard work into putting in the answers that are required that are going to give you the best chance of getting through to interview.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important that you said about utilising those contacts and programmes available. And I think sometimes maybe in the armed forces community there can be this avoidance that people don't want to get help. They see it as getting help, but there's nothing wrong with getting a little bit of help if you need it. And applications can be complicated. I think everyone agrees with that, even outside the armed forces community. So there's no shame in trying to get a little bit of help, and it's a good way in.
On the application forms there will be a contact on there, and so they may get inundated with calls, but that's why you put it on. And so whenever I've been hiring, contact details have gone on to have a chat about it. So again, utilise that. Another thing with the NHS Scotland applications, they're all anonymous, so you don't have names on there or anything like that. But if you have a great conversation with someone, it might be worthwhile mentioning that great conversation that you have, and it could just be that extra thing that just pushes you ahead of the pack.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good you mentioned AI, because obviously that's a rising issue and challenge, and a lot of people sit on both sides of the fence whether you should use it or not. But I think how you described using it is really good for people who it's a good tool. It's not the complete answer. Don't just copy and paste, but it can be a great tool for people who might struggle with that writing section, which many people do, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
No, absolutely. If we've got these tools at our disposal, why not utilise them? It's just hampering yourself unless you are just a fantastic prose writer. Know everything you're going to put in and think you've got it absolutely down pat.
And we talked kind of on that topic about guaranteed interviews. I know there's the guaranteed interviews for people with disabilities.
That's right.
But do you want to talk a little bit how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, sort of, with my dyslexia, something that I sort of hid away from, had sort of, these feelings of shame around it and how that was interpreted growing up. But actually, there's now a greater understanding that it just means you think in a different way, can be more creative. As I say, I like to utilise videos and stories.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I've done that, people said, "Oh, that's absolutely marvellous." I was like, "Oh my God, well, it's just the way I like to learn."
Yeah.
So, you know, that works for me. So actually, when we look at, you know, disability, as I suppose it's a way of looking at it and framing it, but equally with trying to have equal opportunities for all,
Yep.
and knowing that people may not be able to fill in the best application form, and they may be exactly the right person for the job, so actually getting them to interview is the most important part around it. It is highlighting the fact that you have that. Now, just by saying that you have a disability, one, you need to have it. Don't just say you have it, because, you know, then your values come into question. However, with that, you still need to evidence all the essential criteria. You know, it has to be that. So it's a dual-pronged approach. Someone has a disability that's recognised and have filled the essential criteria, then you would get to interview for those reasons that I sort of mentioned there. There isn't currently guaranteed interviews for those from the armed forces community, but what we try and do is make sure that people have got the best chance of getting through based on their applications that they put in, and the knowledge and utilising the contacts and doing all those sorts of things, so that it's done, you know, purely through that merit, and you would hopefully be getting through to interview anyway.
Yeah, perfect. And kind of on the back of that, how do you think the strengths and skills of being in the armed forces and the armed forces community as a whole can transfer into the applications?
So I think there will be a complete range of skills that are built across the entire armed forces community, and
definitely.
I know we've sort of mentioned that sort of an overarching box to put, you know, anyone in with hugely different experiences, hugely different skill sets. But the key thing is about taking those skills and experiences and making sure that they're evidenced. So being values based is one, and if I sort of touch on the questions again, it might make a little more sense. So with the first question, and I don't know verbatim, but, you know, why do you think you're a good fit for the role? Utilising the person specification, you know, describe your experiences and et cetera, so that's where it's evidencing those experiences against essential and desirable criteria. Now, that evidence doesn't necessarily have to be a qualification. It could be experience that's been gained through moving a family around every 3 years, building the resilience, having organisational skills of re-registering at the next doctor, or putting kids into school, or having to make new friends, and, you know, ensuring that you know, you've got local contacts to come and fix a drain, whatever the case might be. But it's about being able to evidence that. So that could just be one area. There is also a lot of work being done, especially because of different qualifications that can be held within England, Scotland, Wales, and so on, around the SCQF, so the Scottish Qualification Framework, to make sure that anything is comparable and can be drawn across. So if you have done a course within the military or a course within an English establishment, that can then be evident. So again, the SCQF is something really good we can put a link to, and people can compare and make sure that they're at the right level for things. And then if I was to move on to the second question, you know, why you know, do you want to join the NHS? Whilst it's lovely to hear that the NHS is a fantastic organisation and people have been treated really well, it's really sort of aiming at, because it's sort of, you know, had in the brackets, think about the organisation's values. So again, it's about evidencing that, and I think this is where the armed forces community comes into its own, with all the services having their, you know, well, from the army, you know, solid C, selflessness, you know, respect for others, etc., etc. With the NHS values, care and compassion, and the key one for me that I look at is the openness, honesty, and responsibility, quality and teamwork, and dignity and respect. They are very easily comparable with the from Army, Navy, or Air Force values, or indeed if you're a family member who's been living with someone. And again, it's about evidencing that. It's not just sort of saying these are what the values are and they're the same. It's, so, you know, I showed care and compassion, you know, when let's just say my mother or father was deployed and I was helping my mum or dad by doing X, Y, and Z. That's evidence, and that's what the armed forces community is able to draw on in absolute droves.
Yeah, I really like that, because I do think a lot of people focus a lot on qualifications and thinking, oh, I don't have anything to back that up qualification-wise, but people have great life experiences, especially young people maybe just coming out of school. They might think that they don't meet certain criteria, but they've lived these really incredible lives. There's a lot of challenges sometimes, and they've gained a lot of really good experience that would transfer over into a job. So I think it's key that people don't just focus purely on qualifications all the time.
Absolutely, and I think as well, values are really key, and if they're sort of drilled in, and there's a lot now that is being looked at, certainly within the board that I sit within, on values-based recruiting, because the idea being, if you have someone whose values align to an organisation, they'll be happier, they'll stick around longer. Financially, that makes more sense for an organisation. Yeah. And then the parts that require qualifications that maybe aren't quite up to scratch, those things can be taught, but you can't actually teach someone's values. That sort of sits deeper within someone. Yeah, no,
I think that's a really nice sum up. Is there any key mistakes you think to avoid in applications, maybe things you see often?
Well, I didn't talk about the third question, and sometimes people don't fill it in.
Yeah.
So is there any other relevant information? Don't leave it blank. It's just one of those things. Yeah. If there is, as part of the essential and desirable criteria about working as part of a team, talk about how you play tiddlywinks, and just anything that can go in there that might just make you stand out. As I've mentioned, don't just write what you think is really good about yourself. Whilst there might be a way of framing that, it needs to line up with that essential and desirable criteria. So it's checking it through. Don't do it in isolation. Double check for things, especially, for me, as I've said, being dyslexic, things like spelling and all that sort of stuff. I'd put it into a Word document first and do little things like that, just to make sure that it's all tied up, and then getting someone else to read over it for you. But read all those questions, because you don't want to run out of steam and all the rest of it. The first thing, as I've said, about considering the essential and desirable criteria, if you come to something and you see you've not got really one of the essential criteria, including the title there, but if you're definitely lacking a couple of them, I wouldn't apply for that job, because you might put loads of effort into it. If you're sort of giving it the due care and attention that you would expect for someone wanting a role, you might spend an hour and a half, 2 hours on that, and there was no way you were ever going to get that role, because you just have not got that essential experience, or whatever the case might be. So they're the sort of key things to avoid. Lots of key things to avoid. Tell you what, come and listen to the application session. We'll try and mitigate those. That's what we do.
No, that's perfect. I think sometimes as well, just talking that essential criteria through with other people, who maybe even if they've not necessarily been in a job with you, sometimes it's good to talk it through, and you can see if you do meet them, or if they remember something you've said that meets it.
Absolutely, and it can be drawn out, isn't it? Sometimes we don't think, what's wonderful about me the whole time. It's just then questions can be asked, probing questions. Have you ever done this? Oh, I have actually. Great. There's your evidence, and it's the ability to do that.
I think that comes in that humble thing from the armed forces, isn't it? They're like, my team done it. I don't know how. But people also contributed to the team, so you've got to think about that. But thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about in regards to applications?
I think everyone will learn in a different way. So what we try and do is put as much information as we can on our website. Again, we can link to that. But also do reach out if people have got individual questions. There's all that information on the website and links that we can drop with this podcast. So definitely. Please do reach out, utilise your network, and we'll do everything we can to help.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
At all.
We'd encourage everyone to check out the NHS Armed Forces Talent Programme website, and the vacancies website, of course, and check out the Future Transactions webpage on Forces Children Scotland. And thank you for viewing.